This is a presentation of the Sports Source Digital Network, presented by Hearthside Bank.
Welcome to Sports Source Hardball. I'm Will Heflin, joined as always by AJ Simcox and Andrew Lee, 3 VFLs here. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Help shows out just like ours. All right, guys. Made it to postseason. Tennessee, number 14 overall national seed. Where do you think that is? Fair, too low, too high?
I think it's relatively fair. I mean, we were kind of on the bubble of hosting with how we played down the stretch. I mean, you lost 5 of the last 6 regular season conference series. I think you did do enough beating Alabama and then beating Texas in the SEC tournament to get the right to host. I mean, you had a solid season and by far the hardest conference in the country. And I think you did enough in the first half of the season to earn that right.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fair.
I think depending on what part of the season you had asked someone that we were going to be a 14 seed, they would have agreed. Maybe preseason, they would have thought it was pretty fair. After the first 25 games, you would say no chance, at least a top 8, probably a top 3. And then right now, I think it's spot on. There was definitely a doubt that we'd be hosting going into the SEC tournament. Like AJ said, we did just enough to get back into that host conversation. I think it's pretty fair. Now, the team we're getting matched up against, regional-wise, maybe a tough, not ideal, but we have a shot. We're playing in Knoxville this weekend, and I think if you had approached anyone before last week, they would have agreed that that's about as good as it could be.
Yeah, let's talk about that matchup. So Tennessee gets Miami of Ohio as the 4 seed. You'll play them on Friday, and then the 2 is Wake Forest from the ACC, and the 3 is Cincinnati from the Big 12. So you got 2 P4 at-large bids in your regional. I think Cincinnati, to me, is a strong 3 seed. Could have been a borderline 2, and I think Wake is probably one of the lower 2 seeds. Extremely talented team, but some head-scratching series. Got some solid wins as well. But overall, I think it's a more than fair draw. Everybody likes to talk about draws this time of year.
Yeah.
You know, March Madness, same deal. Geography plays a slight role in how it's done, but ultimately you've got to mix and match with the conferences. And Tennessee, I think, gets a more than fair regional, but obviously if you look ahead to the super regional, that's a different story. So what do you guys think about the programs, what you've seen so far out of them? I think pretty openly discussed that Cincinnati runs a lot, so that may be the best or the worst, like on paper matchup for Tennessee. But let's start with Miami of Ohio. Pretty offensive team, got a true ace. They don't steal a lot.
Yep.
What are we thinking for Friday?
Well, when the regional first got released, I was like, all right, smooth sailing. I think it'll be relatively easy. We should walk through it. And then I started looking a little bit more at each team individually, and I was like, okay, slow the roll a little bit. Might be a little more difficult than I thought. Miami of Ohio, you mentioned, I mean, they're offensive. They've got one really good pitcher, and then after that it's kind of they've got one good reliever too. But they had the pitcher of the year in their conference. He's 11-1 on the season, 2.66 ERA. And then they've got 2 first-team all-conference players, 3 second-team all-conference players offensively. And that doesn't even include the guy that hit 360 on the season. So I think they're going to kind of try and bop. And we'll see. I think it's going to be interesting to see what Tony and the staff decide to do. Do they start Phillips on Friday and then Doyle for game 2? Knowing that potentially that second game could be against Cincinnati, and they like to run. In the conference tournament, they started Phillips first. He pitched well, controlled the run game, and then Doyle the second game, and Doyle still has that blister too. So it'll be interesting to see what they decide.
An extra day, maybe.
Maybe an extra day, and then you hate to save your guy for the Saturday game and have something happen on Friday, because then you look like the biggest dummy on the planet. Especially winning the first game of regional sets you up so much better to stay out of that loser's bracket. And if you had to take highest runs scored in a regional, I think Knoxville would be the choice. Between Tennessee, Wake Forest, Cincy, and Miami of Ohio, you're looking at teams that are averaging 8 to 10 runs a game. 3 of the 4 are known for hitting the long ball throughout the season. And then Cincinnati's going to try and swipe bags left and right, which I know has been a bugaboo for us, especially the second half of the year. So probably a lot of offense going to be on the scoreboard in Knoxville this weekend. Not that that's not a game that we're not comfortable playing, but the performance in Hoover definitely gave me a little bit more confidence in playing that kind of a game rather than the 5-4 type of game.
Will, what do you think they should do? Do you think they should start Phillips first and then Doyle, or do you go Doyle then Phillips?
I'm starting Phillips game 1.
Yep.
No questions about it. You get Doyle an extra day. He's carried the heaviest load for this team the entire season. You got the blister. Give him an extra day. Yes, the matchup is there, but I also see Phillips as kind of a 1B, right? And aside from the run game issues and that stuff, he's been really, really good
100%
all year long. And if you look at the last 2 outings, he's been better than Doyle.
Yep.
So that's how they've thrown the last 2 weeks. I would just keep them in that routine. Gives Doyle an extra day, and you've got your guy versus the 2 or 3, whoever that may be. And then you don't even have to worry about the possibility of Marcus versus a Cincinnati team that runs a lot.
Yeah.
If you can't beat Miami of Ohio with Marcus Phillips, you're not getting to where you want to go anyways. So I'd be completely good with that.
I'd agree with that too. I mean, Phillips he's projected, second rounder probably. So the stuff's there. He's been pitching better of late. Did a phenomenal job, although it wasn't overly enjoyable to watch against Alabama. Did a phenomenal job controlling the run game. I think he picked over maybe 35 times. He almost picked off for every pitch he threw. But I think matchup-wise, it makes sense to do it as well. The one thing that does concern me about Miami of Ohio, we were talking about it, but I looked and they walk and get hit by a lot of pitches. As a team over the entire season, they've walked and gotten hit by more pitches than they have struck out, which is an insane statistic. You might have a couple guys.
Could be Mac influence.
Yeah, maybe, potentially, but it's still crazy.
Yeah, it's a good.
You might see a couple guys that have that stat throughout a lineup, but for the whole team to be at that level, and they've got a couple guys that they're probably confident in stealing bases. I mean, they've got 4 guys that have 6 or 7 plus on the season, so that could still be a potential thing to consider.
It could. So we talked about the SEC SEC tournament outing. Let's talk about the tournament as a whole. What did that do for you in terms of, obviously Tennessee went and won 2 games, which in turn is essentially an SEC series win, right? So you won 2 games, first one Alabama, second one Texas, 2 different ways to win. You secured that hosting spot, and then obviously the dud against Vanderbilt on Saturday. Do you leave Hoover feeling better or worse about where Tennessee's at?
I'm going to say better because we did 2 things that were somewhat in doubt at the end of the season. Offense exploded against Alabama, which is something we've been waiting for, and then we had a comeback win against a good bullpen in Texas.
Yeah.
And that's something we also have struggled with late in games, whereas in years past, we're down 2, 3, 4 runs going into the 7th, 8th, 9th innings. Was never a doubt. Oh, here comes a 4 spot, right? And that's something that hasn't been a luxury this year that we've been able to experience. So we did both of those things well. I'm going to kind of throw the Vanderbilt loss a little bit under the rug. You would have liked to maybe see some more offense, but we knew going into that game, hey, it's going to be a lot of bullpen arms. Our bullpen hasn't been great this year. So the 10 runs wasn't a surprise. Now the 0 on our end maybe got to me a little bit, but like you said, counted as a series win. It got us back into that regional hosting conversation. So I saw what I wanted to see, and I'll push everything else aside and not worry about it.
I was similar, and it stings more because that's your rival. You should be able to get up for that game, right? But you did what you needed to do, and then it was death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, they had 16 hits and not a single extra base hit. It was
and that's how Vandy's been playing lately.
It felt early on like it ain't your day.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? A couple bleeders through the middle, and Tennessee, if that were to happen to them moving forward, they've got to respond better, 100%. But in that tournament style, you've already done what you needed to do. Yep. It's impossible not to let that subconscious feeling kind of take over. And you see those games get away from teams in Hoover sometimes.
Yeah, no, you absolutely do. I will say the one concern is that's also how Vandy beat us in the series here, right, for the most part. They had a couple balls out of the park as well, but they just have been playing very good fundamental baseball. And that's something that Tennessee has kind of lacked over the last month and a half of the season. And when you play teams that are really good like that, I mean, Kentucky That's the one nice thing I'll say about him. Kentucky, another example, took 2 or 3 of us from us because of that death by 1,000 cuts, and so that could cause a little concern. But overall, I'm not too worried coming out of the SEC tournament. I think it was a great thing. Russell got extended; he pitched very well. Arvidsson pitched phenomenal, so maybe that gives us another boost out of the bullpen, gives him some confidence. The staff that we used against Vandy has been a flip of the coin the last month and a half anyways. I mean, that's why we've lost 5 of the last 6 series, is because our Sunday pitching has just not been up to par. But I think Russell could potentially be the fix on that. As far as the offense in that game, I think that was more of a Vanderbilt pitching thing. Their starting pitcher was phenomenal that game. And so I do think the explosion that they had the first 2 games is a big plus, and I think it was more of a tip your cap to the starter that Vandy had that next day.
You alluded to it. Game 3 in the regional.
Yeah.
Are you holding Russell for that?
Well, I think it's going to be completely dictated by the situation. If Phillips goes 6 or 7, then I'm not bringing him in. I'm trying to ride it out with maybe Arvidsson first, and then finish it with Snead, and then let Doyle ride on Saturday. And typically whether he gives up 0 or gives up 4 or 5, he's typically going to go pretty deep in the game. But I mean, who knows? We're saying this hypothetically, but we don't even know. I think I saw a tweet earlier that said Tony had alluded to potentially starting Doyle first and then Phillips second. So I don't know. I mean, it's all going to be based off situational. But I would try and save him for that 3rd game.
But possible. You're not announcing him as for sure your game 3 start, like as if it were a normal rotation.
I think they go game 3 undecided.
TBA.
Yeah.
You doing the same thing?
You never know what's going to happen. God forbid you lose a starter early in one of those 2 games. Yeah. I think he's the automatic go-to, probably him or Arvidsson.
Yeah.
Just as somebody that has the stuff and can give you the length to get you through.
And you can get the length from Snead too.
Yeah.
It hasn't been as consistent as it was last year or as reliable, but I think, in a big situation, he's been there, he's done it. And so I think that's something else you can do. But I would say behind the curtains, you've got Russell penciled in as the day 3 starter, but out in the open in public, it's undecided. If everything goes according to plan, he's the day 3.
Yeah. That was my biggest takeaway from Hoover is Russell broke through that 45-50 pitch wall, which we both had, Tommy John. You can't get through that until you just get through it.
You can do as many throwing programs as you
get
want.
up to it, and
it doesn't matter.
Until you're out there and realize, like, hey, I still feel good and keep going, you just don't know. So that was awesome to get to that 70-75 count. And then Arvidsson came right out of the woodworks. And Hoover's kind of for that, right? Usually you have a guy come out of nowhere and burst onto the scene, and Arvidsson is, that one slapped us in the face, is clearly a guy you feel good about going into postseason that you didn't know beforehand, and last year that was Dylan Loy.
Yeah, and I'll give Wes Rucker a little bit of credit here. He's been saying it nonstop. Arvidsson has the stuff. That's the reason we brought him in from San Jacinto, but he could never have it together at the same time. It'd be walk, strikeout, base hit, all of a sudden he's getting pulled from the game. Finally, you saw him string that together. And, I mean, now we have maybe 4 solid starters, or at least 3 solid starters and a great bullpen option with him, coming aboard. And like you said, Hoover will expose that because it makes you go that deep into your rotation.
I think one of the big concerns is, do you have enough guys in the bullpen that you can trust to where you don't leave those guys in slightly too long? Like, I think of it as the Clayton Kershaw effect, right? When the Dodgers were first before they are what they are now, he was always the ace starting the big game in the playoffs, and he would be dominant through 5-6 innings, give up 1 run, and then they would always leave him in 1 inning too late because he was the guy and they didn't really have a bridge to Kenley Jansen in the bullpen, and they would always leave him in, and then something would happen and he would implode for 3-4 runs. You look at the stats and it's 6 1/3, 5 earned runs or whatever. Do we have enough guys in the bullpen to shorten those outings to where they don't get stretched long and the damage can come?
Well, that's always the toughest decision as a coach, is when to pull a guy. But certainly something to keep in mind. This episode of Hardball is brought to you by the Garza Law Firm. When you need an attorney, look for the best and be sure they're local. That's Marcos Garza and the Garza Law Firm, proud supporters of Tennessee baseball. Okay, so if you're the team or the coaching staff, you are not worried about the Super Regional.
Correct.
But us sitting here talking about it, we can talk about what's ahead for Tennessee if they get through the Knoxville Regional. In all likelihood, it's probably Arkansas in Baum Stadium. If Kansas or one of the 3 or 4 seeds were to upset and win that regional, then Tennessee would be at home for a super regional. But Kansas, very formidable opponent. They're kind of like Cincinnati, just a little bit better. So that's going to be a tough matchup for Arkansas. They fight. They're kind of like the cardiac kids out of the Big 12. But Arkansas and Baum Stadium, obviously the favorite. So what do you think that is like in terms of a draw for Tennessee? You think that's a solid matchup? If you want to spin it positively, Arkansas has kind of crumbled the last few times in Baum Stadium when you have that many fans. And for whatever reason, that program, kind of like Tennessee basketball a little bit, they feel the pressure of the postseason, right? Trying to get over the hump. Is that something that will help Tennessee, or do you think it's a really tough draw because you're going to one of the best stadiums in the country?
I'm going to be honest, I have no idea, and I don't think anybody really does, right? I mean, you can look at it 1,000 different ways. We just went there, and they put up, a 5-spot, 6-spot, something like that on Doyle. I think they Doyle gave up 6, 8 total, 6 earned.
They got him.
Yeah, they got him. So, I mean, you could look at it from that point of view. You could look at it, okay, well, we just went in there. We know what it's about. We played them tough. We won a game without Doyle on the mound. Doyle's not going to repeat that performance. You like your chances there.
Tennessee hit pretty well that weekend.
And Tennessee did hit well. Their offense is also very good. So, that matchup, I don't know if it's overly in our favor. And then there's also Tony V coming from Arkansas. That's always going to be a storyline too. And he wants that one a little bit more. And do they get up a little overamped for that? Does he get a little overamped for that? But it would be a pretty awesome story for Tony V to be able to go in there and eliminate his old boss.
Not that you ever say, the Super Regional's not going to mean as much, but this is one that it's impossible not to get up for.
It's almost College World Series championship feel.
Truly. Two top teams, especially in the last 5 years, and then this year as well. Talent-wise, prestige-wise, if you can't get up for that, you can't get up for anything, right? That's the best atmosphere you'll have outside of being in the big leagues as a ball player. Tough matchup, not one that is great on our end because Arkansas is a team that's hit first and premier arms on the front end, which is what's given us trouble. We get through those Friday, Saturday games, maybe split it, and then game 3 is where it comes down to the line, and the bullpen hasn't quite been there in our favor. But as we've said, maybe we have a couple more solutions for game 3 now that we didn't see beforehand. So while tough opponent, I think it's one that I don't see us as an impossible task to overcome.
Yeah. One of those deals where you get that thing to game 3, anything can happen. Who knows? So overall, well, first off, Tennessee has made the College World Series several times in the last few years, right? They've done it as a top 8 national seed. It went to Omaha as the 3 seed and the 1 seed overall, last year being the 1. They made it to Omaha via the road, going to Clemson and then to Southern Miss. So if Tennessee were to make it to Omaha this year, it would be a new path, which would be hosting the regional, potentially on the road for Supers, which is kind of another notch in Tony Vitello's belt. I think by the time his career is over, he's going to have made it to Omaha every which way you can think of. But right now, he's still kind of checking the boxes. Overall, do you think the path is fair? Do you like the path? Is it not the most comforting feeling? I mean, I think for me, the biggest thing, it's hard not to think about that Arkansas matchup potentially. They haven't played their best baseball either as of late. And they kind of put up a dud in Hoover. They had a bunch of guys on, couldn't hit anybody in. Now, the hay was in the barn for them. But, you go like 0 for 14 with runners in scoring position, that can linger, because when you're in the box, you're competing. It doesn't matter what you're thinking about, once you've left that stadium. So I think overall the path is fair. Tennessee can get to wherever they want to go if Tennessee allows itself to. I think they match up with anybody. Them and Arkansas, 2 of the most talented teams in the country, but I think Tennessee can beat anyone if they play their B-plus game. Like, they don't
It's
even
just,
have to play.
Can you do it over a 3-game series?
Doesn't even have to be
That's the big
A-plus.
thing.
You know, get one game that's an A, one game that, you know, you lose that's maybe a C, and then your B-plus game can beat anybody.
Well, and if those struggles had been mixed up instead of 6 weeks in a row, I think we would have less apprehension about this. But we were rocking and rolling so well early in the season, and if it had been mixed in a little bit more, I think this would be a much more comfortable feeling where we're sitting right now. But just given the recent struggles, and I mean, resume-wise, very similar to Arkansas, maybe a couple more key series that they won down the stretch or were able to, you know, scratch out a series win where we weren't. But evenly matched, talent-wise, prestige-wise, fan base-wise. It's going to be probably the best Super to watch if it comes down to those two teams.
I think too. I mean, I think it is pretty fair, right? Like we played ourselves into this position. You pretty much at the halfway point of SEC play, you pretty much had a top 8 national seed locked in.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you just go 3-3, maybe even 2-4 the last 6 series, you're a top 8 seed getting the opportunity to potentially host a Super. And you just didn't play good enough to earn that right down the stretch. So I do think it is pretty fair. I still think the whole key to it all is going to be, can we shore up the defense, and then AJ Russell. If he can come in and pitch like he's continuing to progress and get us a little bit more length and pitch like he did in the SEC tournament, I think you got to feel really confident about your rotation going into it, and that should solidify the Sunday scaries that we've had.
Yeah.
I'm going to add one more. Score when we get runners in scoring position.
Yeah.
Even at like a 50% clip, that would have gotten the job done for us in a couple of those series losses. Getting guys on base has not been the issue. It's been scoring them, guys on second with nobody out, getting those guys in, and like 2-out knocks with the bases loaded.
What do y'all think? How do y'all think they'll approach defense, the positioning? Do you think they leave it as is? Do you think they put Levi Clark in left and DH, one of the infielders? Leave it as is?
Knowing Tony, he will ride the horse he came in on 10 times out of 10.
Yeah.
I think he doesn't mess with anything.
Yeah, it's not changing. Not changing, but it is definitely a postseason sport. I think everybody needs to realize that Tennessee is now 0-0, as is everybody else. We appreciate you for watching, as always. Please do like and subscribe, and we will hopefully be back to talk about the Super Regional preview this time next week.